Atari 8-bit computers had awesome games. I'm going to show you just a handful of the games that I have and tell you how to get the rest. So what you typically will find when you find Atari 8-bit computer cartridges is some of these that I'm going to show you. Now this is an Atari 8-bit computer cartridge. This is a standard 2600 cartridge, just to show the comparison. They're smaller. They are relatively more uncommon to find, and typically you'll find the classics. Again, you know, this computer was around a long time, well, you know, a decade plus. So there were several incarnations of how the cartridges looked. The first run games had these kind of maroon, brown, black labels. Some of the more classic games. Totally recommend Donkey Kong. Inexpensive, cheap, and one of the better versions of it. And a lot of these games are either identical to the 5200 counterpart, with the exception of Centipede. The actual 5200 one's better. But some of them, a lot of them had graphical enhancements that made them better than the Atari 2600 versions. And you get to play with a standard 2600 controller, which was a benefit. So several of these games, classics, Space Invaders, Defender, Asteroids, Galaxian. Galaxian's pretty good. Star Raiders being another big, awesome seller for the 8-bit computer line. And so they decided that as time went on, when the XL line, they went to the silver label on the standard black cartridges, and so you have some pretty much some other versions of games that didn't come out. These are a little bit harder to get. And then even later, when the XEGS came out, you had re-releases of old games on XEGS style carts, and obviously these are some of the XEGS games. Blue Max, by the way, my favorite game on the system. Buy it, play it, love it. Awesome game. You play this, and River Raids just isn't the same anymore. There were several third-party cartridges. Magic made a couple. Broderbund. I mean, these are just epics. These are all classics to play. Jumpman Jr., Gateway to Apshai. That is River Raid. Parker Brothers, Q*bert Frogger. These are pretty common to get. Both good versions. CBS Software even made a line. And then some of the more uncommon stuff. Gorf, Wizard of War, Deluxe Invaders. You find this stuff typically. But most of the time, cartridges are really hard to get. For every 10 Atari 2600 cartridges you'll find in the wild, you'll rarely find these cartridges. And they're really hard to get in bulk. You know, this is accumulation of collecting several years at shows. So, like I said, I just have but a handful of games. So, back to the other things that an Atari computer can play is discs. And, you know, like I said, this is a standard Atari computer disc. And, you know, you typically wouldn't find a box. This is obviously a military strategy game. And sometimes a lot of the discs, they'll work for both Commodore and Atari, one for each side. I'm not going to say deal. I mean, like I said, if you're a computer tinkerer and you love playing games off disc, this is the way to go. These can be fragile and sensitive to temperature, and like I said, here's what I give. There's two ways to go for you want to play the games. So you can play the games via cartridge, or you can play discs. But, you know, this is, you know, 2011, and there's several other alternatives. Totally recommend either a flash cartridge, or what they've recently came out with is these SD interfaces, which connect to your computer, and pretty much you're able to play literally almost everything. And so the nice things about these flash cartridges, you can, you know, it takes a little bit to tinker with getting the ROMs onto the cartridge. I went through Atari Max, pretty much had no problems getting my product. It took a little bit to tinker to get the games onto this, but I have about I have about 40 games on this cartridge, and they're all the arcade classics. Pretty much stick it in, and for about 50, 60 bucks, that's good to go. The SD interface, which there's several people on Atari Age that are selling them in the 8-bit computer forum. That's a newer way to go. I haven't done it, but I have a good friend, John Rose, who's a huge Atari 8-bit computer collector, and he loves his. So that's the ways of the routes of going for games. And here's some more uncommon boxes. ET Phone Home, which is different than the ET game on the 2600. As you notice, the boxes are ginormous, and you typically won't find them in box, or if you do, you find pretty common games. This is a rare accessory, which is kind of weird. It's Robotron, and here's the game, but it came with a 2600 controller coupler, which you would stick your 2600 controllers into this holder, and you can mimic the arcade. Again, really bizarre. Not my favorite version of Robotron. The best version is on 7800, but it's kind of unique and interesting. But anyways, this gives you kind of an overview. My advice is go the SD card interface for the computer, or just get yourself a flash card. And if you're, most people are collecting the computer for the game aspect. That's the way to go. Thank you for looking at this.